Good afternoon. From behalf of our panel, it's a pleasure to welcome you all in our session. We're here this afternoon to discuss about the new security architecture from the Caucasus to the Middle East. We have with us, first of all, from my right, Mr. Gela Bezhuashvili, Ambassador, Board Member of Strategy International, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Georgia. Next to Mr. Bezhuashvili is Dr. Farid Bakeri, I spelled it right, Senior Scholar on West Asia, Member of Strategy International. Next to me on my left, but not the leftist, General Efthymiopoulos Board Member of Strategy International, and former, among others, former Chief of the National Guard of the Republic of Cyprus. We have also, of course, first of all, Dr. Efthymiopoulos, founder of Strategy International, Associate Professor of International Security and Strategy, Head of Department of History, Politics and International Studies at Neapolis University, Paris. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Joseph Demertzis, Director of Research in Strategy International. And we have, through Zoom connection, I believe, Dr. Adrian Severin, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Romania. Does Mr. Severin? Yeah. Okay. Because I cannot listen to anything. So, we proceed. We lost some time. I keep my watch here. Let's try to be sharp. So, let's begin. I will have some introduction, and then we can go to each speaker. Don't try not to exceed 10 minutes, please. And after your 10 minutes introduction speech, maybe we'll have one question for about 2 minutes. So let's try to be quite sharp with our time. This year marks 34 years since the fall of the Soviet regime, since the formal end of the Cold War. And yet the world is much more fragile now. I single out two defining points along the way from 1990 to today. In 1994, Russia joined the Partnership for Peace program, and by 2011 had reached joint exercises with NATO. Many were also discussing the possibility of joining NATO. What happened and we reached the point where NATO and Russia are on the verge of a military confrontation, culminating in the case of Ukraine. The second defining point, both for the security architecture in our wider region, but also for the whole world, I think is the so-called Arab Spring after 2011. Is the coincidence of these cases, 2011, accidental? In between, I also mentioned some events with a regional but also a global dimension. First, the failure of in Israel-Palestine rapprochement after the Oslo Agreement. Second, the failure of the Annan Plan in Cyprus 10 years later. The dissolution of Yugoslavia and the war adventures in the Balkans. The Russian intervention in Georgia. The failure of the West in Afghanistan. And the dominance of Azerbaijan with the tolerance of Russia in the crucial conflict for the Caucasus with Armenia. In the developments we had after 1990, what could we characterize as a paradox or a surprise? Not facts such as the Czech-Slovakian divorce, not the overthrow of the until recently de facto state of Artsakh Nagorno-Karabakh, not yet the integration of Crimea into Russia, not the new war conflict in Palestine, but certainly there are paradoxes for the flow of modern history. The Brexit, the withdrawal of the United Kingdom from the EU, the near disintegration of Spain, the invasion of American parastatal groups in the capital, in Washington, at the heart of the Western world's decisions, the tendency of young people of the Western world, many Christians among them, to join armies of Islamic fundamentalism. What gives inspiration to young people that the Western way of life does not give them? And I ask some questions. Maybe the next front is for the control of sub-Saharan Africa. Is the West retreating? Are other leaders emerging on the world stage? Is the retreat of the West a question of identity, spiritual strength, cultural values? These questions are quite philosophical, but I think they give some answer to today's situation. And permit me to give the floor to Farid first.
Yeah, on very important issues. Because time is limited, I'll be rushing through a lot of points. Forgive me for the speed. The two regions, Caucasus and the Middle East. In the Caucasus, we usually mean 6 countries: Iran, Russia, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Turkey. And Middle East, which is Middle East and North African region, the MENA region, it goes anything from 15 to 20. But the interesting thing is that Iran is visible. Iran is on both lists, Caucasus and Middle East. Turkey sometimes is mentioned in the Middle East, not always. And Caucasus, of course. Some certain points. Security and peace are not always synonymous. It doesn't mean if you have security, you have peace. In fact, it can be the other way around. Some people may claim, and I'm not agreeing with that there were times that the Israeli government, for instance, felt that peace with the Arabs would go against the security of Israel, because as soon as the Arabs felt secure, they would try to stage and organize an attack against Israel. Keeping them on their toes was far more secure for the Israelis, some may claim. So these two are not necessarily synonymous. The Second World War, security of the West was in fighting Hitler, security of the world. Traditional security means basically defending your territorial integrity by military power. And peace is mainly the silence of the guns. But in modern understanding, security permeates all political, social, economic, cultural levels in the country. And peace is more holistic. It's not just silence of the guns, but the absence of violence in all its forms, structural violence, or even the threat of violence. But very, very broadly defined, security is the achievement of what is perceived to be in the national interest of any given country. But security for whom? And for what? Status quo, if the status quo is the preferred state of affairs, then that status quo, stability and peace of that status quo, is tantamount to the security of change. Overtakes the assumptions and predictions of policymakers. Insecurity takes over the spirit of the state, and preparedness for violence assumed priority. Like now, there is unpredictability, and people want to be safe rather than sorry. So they prepare for violence, for war. If the status quo or the global trends tend to appear to be detrimental to the perceived interest of any state, particularly existential threat, then the resort to violence is very, very likely. Israel, for instance, considers some of these, or the attack, as existential threat. I'm not saying it is existential, but that's how some of them perceive it. Some basic facts in the Caucasus and the MENA region. Islamists hold power in Iran. When I say Islamists, I'm not talking Islamic, Islamists. It is radical. We leave Afghanistan aside. Islamic government in Turkey. Then we have Islamist groups in Lebanon, like a state within a state, Hezbollah. Houthis in Yemen, Gaza, Islamic Jihad and Hamas. In Iraq, we have Hashd-ul-Shabi, we have Kataib and Hezbollah, and we have many others. In Syria, Fatimiyun and others. These groups is Islamic or Islamist. They do not tolerate opposition, by the way. They challenge and want to disrupt if a trend is viewed against them. For instance, the Abraham Accord between Israel and some Arab states, which was going to be extended to Saudi Arabia as well, is thought to be against them. They fought it, they challenged it, and some even claim that Iran encouraged the Hamas attack in order to disrupt the rapprochement getting closer between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And if it was, it worked, at least until now. That's one fact. Russia wants Ukraine to be in its sphere of influence. West, particularly Europe, do not want and do not share that viewpoint. Europe has stood against Russia, and we do so, but it needs American support. It cannot do it on its own. And American support is uncertain at times. If, for instance, next year Trump comes, things may change completely. Trump comes to office, I mean Donald Trump. Russia, that's the second fact. Russia, Ukraine. First one, Iran and the Arab-Israel rapprochement. Excuse me. Russia is the EU's main supplier of gas. 43% of imported natural gas come from Russia for Europe. Even despite the military thing, Russian gas transit to Europe continues, and some 35 to 40 million cubic meters per day go, even though just very recently they say it's dropped sharply. Apart from that, Ukraine has got the largest deposits of lithium in Europe. And some people say this was in fact a lithium war, not a war on Ukraine. It may be lithium, but it's because Russia wants to have the lithium for itself that has attacked Ukraine. Now, Russia wants to oppose the trend that they want to kind of quote-unquote westernize Ukraine, part of the EU, part of NATO. Iran wants to oppose the trend between Israel and the Arabs. And in this, now they've become partners, almost partners in the war in Ukraine. Even though Russia has not officially joined Iran or saying that it disagrees with the accord, but it doesn't miss any opportunity to say that whatever goes wrong is American fault in the Arab-Israeli relations. If the Abraham Accords continue as well, they will fundamentally change the geopolitics of the region. I have to be quick. One more thing, you mentioned Arab Spring. Nationalism works amongst people who are not tribal. In Egypt, Arab Spring led to change, and then the army came back and took over. The unity of Egypt was kept because there was a national army, a sense of Egyptian nationalism, long history. In Libya, there was tribalism. And affiliation and loyalty to the tribe supersedes loyalty to the state, because the state is so young. And we see the mess they're in. Well, partly, I think the West has part of the blame as well. Keep it like that. Iraq. Iraq as a nation is young. And loyalty to the tribe. Saddam was called Saddam of Takrit, the name of his tribe. Yemen is tribal. In tribal countries, as a rule, it's difficult to promote nationalism and change through nationalism. The last thing I want to say is that civilizational trend, Samuel Huntington, in that basically, that the Chinese, the Russians, and the Islamic world will get together against the Judeo-Christian world is politically incorrect, but he hasn't been far off the mark so far. What he has said, basically identity politics is playing a more assertive role in the region. We saw who you may have seen last night. Half an hour he was giving history lecture.
And wrong history.
And wrong history, but what I think, he considers that important. He lies, whatever, but he considers it important for identity to bring that to the fore.
But the wrong history.
Okay, wrong history, fair enough. And he was Orthodox Christianity. I had never heard him mention Orthodox Christianity.
You mentioned the Romans.
Civilizational predictions are suicidal and they kill themselves. Like, for instance, Karl Marx may have been correct in saying that there would be a final revolution and the proletariat would take over. But because he said that, and because the Russian Revolution, Bolshevik Revolution took place, suddenly the West woke up and said, oh God, he may have been right. And then they did everything to make sure it doesn't go any further than that. Now, the same with Huntington. Because he said it, he identified a trend. Now, a lot of countries may do stuff, may adopt policies to stop it from happening. And as a point of maybe optimism, and they said that the civilizational discourse that Huntington identified does have loopholes. For instance, as one, in the Armenia-Azerbaijan dispute, the Muslim Iran supports the Christian Armenia, who is fighting with the Muslim Azerbaijan. So here, identity politics cannot answer why. So there are loopholes in that. I leave it at that. Thank you very, very much.
I thank you, and forgive me because I forgot to introduce you the right way. Mr. Farid Mirbagheri is Professor of International Relations and a Senior Consultant on West Asia at Strategy International. He held the Dialogue Chair in Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Nicosia up to his retirement in recently, 2023. Of course, he was also a member of the original committee of Jubilee 2000, a global movement that has been campaigning for the remission of the backlog of unpayable debt by poorer countries. His latest books include War and Peace in Islam, very interesting, and the Historical Dictionary of Cyprus. Do we have maybe a question? A brief question, needs brief answer. I have a question, Professor. The disruption of maritime commerce nowadays in the Red Sea hurts most of all Chinese, because all those containers cannot go the way they should go and where they should go. What does China do about that? What is intending to do about it?
From what I've seen in the media, China has asked and has also been asked by the Americans to intercede. China recently, for the first time, played a huge diplomatic role in brokering the resumption of diplomatic relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which was like a small political coup d'etat. Now, Americans asked them if they can to stop them from, to stop Houthis by using their influence on Iran. And they have done that. The thing is, Houthis are kind of being careful not to target those, but this doesn't matter, because once you attack, insurance goes up, ship owners do not want to go through, and then when the price goes up, Chinese economy is hurt. So they are trying, but we'll see how far this goes. If it goes much further and they feel this is really significantly disrupting their economy, I think they'll just give a pat on the shoulder, and as they have now, to my knowledge, they have not openly opposed I mean, they may have issued a statement, but they have not really opposed the military action against the Houthis. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that other than Islamist army, Iran and the Houthis and others, because the war on Hamas is really hurting them. Is hurting them in a big way. It's hurting them so much that once Hamas goes, then they feel it's Lebanon's, is Hezbollah's time. And if Hezbollah goes, then Iran really feels it may be its turn. So for them, it is very important to stop Israel as soon as they can.
Thank you. We keep security and peace are not the same. Peace is holistic. We certainly can't claim that we have the peace we need. Islamic and Islamistic factor is crucial. Tribal identity is crucial. Energy resources, most of all, are crucial. Thank you, Farid. And we should give the floor to Gela, Director of Intelligence and National Security Advisor to the President. He started his public sector career in 1991 at the Foreign Ministry. In 2005, he was appointed as the Foreign Minister. Also, he was the first, after that, he was the first civilian Minister of Defense. He graduated from the Ukrainian Institute of International Relations and International Law. So you do have something more to say about Ukraine. In 1992-2000, Gela Bezhuashvili was actively involved as a national expert in cooperation with the European structures, Council of Europe and EU, on issues of international law, fight against corruption and protection of national minorities. He also completed his studies at Harvard University, and he was nominated as the Man of the Year 2004 by the American Biographical Institute, USA.
I'm pleased to be here and pleased to represent the Strategy International Board. So I will, for the sake of the time, I will go through my notes just to show you, since we talk about security architecture and the new security architecture, I must say from the beginning that the security architecture that we remember is broken. It's broken not only on a regional level but on a global level. It's not new, everybody witnessed it. But I would like to focus more on a regional perspective and what's going on and how I see the situation is evolving. So the current international security architecture faces the greatest challenge since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Farid mentioned a time frame. So Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine and aggression against a sovereign country in February 2022. They shook the foundation of the rule-based order and triggered tectonic geopolitical changes not only globally but also regionally. So relations between the West and Russia deteriorated in unprecedented manner since the Cold War ended. The first time in the Vilnius summit of July 2023, in the policy documents of this alliance declared Russia to be, I quote, the most significant and direct threat to allies' security and to peace and stability in the Euro-Atlantic area, unquote, emphasizing also, quote, the Black Sea region is of a strategic importance for the alliance, end quote. So what does it mean? In history, retrospect, when I was in the government, almost 20 years ago, we had difficulties in explaining in the Euro-Atlantic community the importance of the Black Sea for the transatlantic relationship. So my colleagues, Romanians, my colleagues from Bulgaria and Georgia, we were knocking on every door, trying to raise the issue of Black Sea security as a pillar, as an integral part of the security architecture regional. And we were not heard. But finally, after invasion, These policy documents have been updated, and now the Black Sea is part of the architecture, which is broken, and it will need a great deal of creativity and energy for all of us in order to construct a new architecture. But that's, I think, the time will come for it. So another very important historic moment was the European Union historic decision of enlargement. So the political decisions have been made. My country, as well as Ukraine and Moldova, politically will be integrated. It will take some time, but it will be integrated into the European Union. And that political decision changes the context of the regional development. Another interesting dimension is that Russian dependence on China, but it also mentioned it. Dependence on China has increased exponentially, actually, because with implications for global security, the China is being seen by many experts. I heard it, and I tend to agree with that hypothesis that the China is the most winning part out of this global chaos, using every momentum to solidify their own global role. So the war in Ukraine has demonstrated, and I think this is another new for Georgia. Georgia was a victim of Russian aggression in 2008. Again, knocking on every door, raising the flags, not heard. Our messages and our claims were not received with the proper attention. And I think now many colleagues in Europe, the Germans, French, has recognized the strategic mistake that the Georgians were not paranoid about Russia, but were serious in raising the issue of Russian global ambitions in keeping the post-Soviet space, post-Soviet borders as a part of their spheres of influence. So the Russian goal is, to me, from my perspective, is to dismantle the post-World War II international security architecture, redraw the borders of neighboring countries, reducing them into satellite states with nominal sovereignty. That's something that they wanted to achieve, and all the tools are being employed by Russia. Yesterday interview was a fantastic example of it. We need to read it again, but still lie after lie, wrong history being employed, a wrong argument for the sake of covering the aggression against the sovereign country. And by the way, we are talking about permanent member of the Security Council being aggressor, in aggressor's role. And that's something that is really showing how weak today institutions are, how weak the United Nations is, how weak the Organization of European Security is, and all other elements of the current global security architecture. We are witnessing the prospect of the end of rules-based international order. The Russian president yesterday basically said that there is no rules-based orders, and Russia is not going to obey rules-based order written by Americans. That's how they perceive rules-based order that we all know and we all appreciate and we all embrace. So the Black Sea region and the South Caucasus, they represent the primary target of Moscow's revanchist and expansionist agenda. I mentioned 2008, 2014, annexation of Crimea. Also, international community reaction was mild. So as a result, the appetite of aggressive Russia has increased. Within the Black Sea, winning in the Black Sea would provide Russia with a strategic advantage to continue its aggressive moves toward Eastern Europe and even Baltics. Disruption of East-West connectivity, and a connectivity is a very broader definition, and I'm not going to go in details, but connectivity includes many things, many aspects, but disruption of the connectivity is a role of Russia in setting up its control on such connectivity, especially on the Caucasus and the Black Sea area. So a few words about very important events that took place last 2 years in the region, especially this is Karabakh conflict and the war that gave new dimensions in the security environment in the region. The second one is, of course, Hamas' brutal attack on Israel in retaliation by Israel, which again I refer to the yesterday interview with the Russian president, who, when being asked what is the most important geopolitical event that is taking place today, he didn't mention Ukraine. He didn't mention aggression of Russia against Ukraine, but he mentioned Middle East, and he mentioned Israel. By the way, he put Israel in a on the wrong side of his rhetorics, and he was trying to victimize the Hamas, and that shows you how playful these guys are to cover their own aggressive moves. So on Karabakh, yes, we all know what happened. It changed geopolitical landscape, at least on the regional level. One may see that, of course, Azerbaijan and of course Turkey, with the help of Turkey, Azerbaijan achieved their long-term national goal of the unity of their country, which is extremely important for all of us, because Georgia is striving to do the same, unsuccessfully, but setting up a precedent that the conflicts can be resolved of territorial integrity is extremely important. So the Baku and Ankara significantly strengthened their standing in the region as a result of it. At a glance, one may say that Armenia is on a losing side, but I would put it differently. In my view, Armenia was kept, prisoner of long-term burden of the Karabakh conflict on their shoulders, and I think what I observe now in the dynamics of the Armenian government is trying actually to initiate constitutional reform today in order to remove Karabakh notion from the constitutional documents of the country, which shows you the desperation and shows you the resolve of the Armenian government to put an end of the conflict. And I do expect, by the way, within this year, by the end of the year, I do expect that Armenia and Azerbaijan will sign a peace agreement, and that will be extremely important for a regional cooperation between three, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, which will strengthen the position of three in many respects, especially economically and from security point of view. Another element which also related with Georgia's candidate status to the European Union, Armenians are increasingly interested in European choice, which was not a case several years ago, because now they have a real, it's not just a hope, but a real case when the country from the South Caucasus becomes a member of European Union. So the population increasingly is Western, is turning toward the West, and I do expect the pro-Westernism of Armenia is going to be increased. Secondly, the influence of Russia will be diminished. Although we need to mention that Russia will continue to have, for some time, great leverage on Armenian politics. So, what needs to be done? This is a question today, which is a really difficult question, because I don't see many people who knows what needs to be done, but at least what we need to achieve in order to create a platform, create a ground for a new security architecture. In my view, the most important thing is that the NATO and the European Union and the Western Alliance should keep the resolve and unity, Georgia and Moldova, into the Western institutions. That needs to be supported by all means. What it will give back It would stabilize the Black Sea region, entering into EU and NATO. It will curb Russia's expansion in ambitions and dissuade other global actors to seek the confrontation with NATO and with Western alliance. It will eventually, it will facilitate normalization between Moscow and the West, eventually, including renewal of the arms control framework, which is broken as well, with a potential engagement of other relevant states, because the nuclear pillar and nuclear issue is a theme of a separate discussion. Because in my view, this is a serious threat of proliferation regime to be broken. It is in a very, very fragile situation today, proliferation regime. And I think Russia is signaling this very loudly. So it will provide Europe with a better geopolitical position regarding China and Central Asia, so connectivity issue comes here. So the EU and NATO should keep under the radar the Black Sea area and the South Caucasus for the sake of better geopolitical position versus China and so-called Global South. So, and of course it will motivate South Caucasus countries to follow the path of integration into the West, and Armenia is a very, very good example of this. It is crucial that Western alliance prevails in demonstrating the strategic perseverance and determination in responding to the fundamental challenges posed by Russia and its allies, leaving the grey zones in Europe, which I think was a case in the past, the Black Sea and South Caucasus, Balkans, make it vulnerable to Kremlin expansionist agenda. The enlargement of NATO and EU is crucial in bolstering the security and stability in the Euro-Atlantic area and ensuring robust international security architecture and rule-based order. Russia is not alone in its crusade against the West. Again, I mentioned China, I would like to outline it again. China having more resources, through acting with the caution and pragmatism, supports the idea to challenge the change, the current rules-based world order laid by the United States, but they do it in a different manner. They don't do it in a, I like that expression that one expert used, as a king of mentality, when you just scream about China does it differently, but the goal is the same. So we are witnessing now China, Russia, and North Korea, Iran, and some other allies of this axis. They are building an anti-Western alliance. So actually, what we are dealing with not a battlefield for resources, not a battlefield for territory. I think it's ideological battlefield between democratic governance and authoritarian regime. And that's on a bigger scale. It's all about, it might be resources in Ukraine, it might be something else, but in a bigger scale, it's an ideological battlefield. That makes this case extremely important for the future of countries, especially like Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine, who are now in between of those walls and trying to get rid of their Soviet past. So I will finish here, and if you have any questions.
Thank you, dear Ambassador. Let's summarize some of the points. I would emphasize the following. From the current situation, perhaps the only winner, again, is China. Peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia is nearby. Armenia, that is very close to us. Again, China plays a crucial role in supplying Russia with the critical components used in military technology, and NATO and EU enlargement is essential in building the viable security architecture. The EU decision on opening accession negotiations with the Ukraine and Moldova, while granting the candidate status to Georgia, are extremely important developments. And the approach of Vladimir Putin to Hamas goes together with the Turkey, Iran and Russia alliance.
You know,
Because the way they
are
stand
not an
towards
alliance,
Hamas.
but they sound like
Yes.
the same. told the goals probably are different national goals, but they sound like the same.
The former chief of the National Guard of the Republic of Cyprus and the honorary commander of the First Army of the Hellenic Army, having assigned among others their medals by the Hellenic Cypriot and Third Republics and by the UN. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning from my side as well at our times. And in this part of the world, I think that the theme of this conference could not be more pertinent. And I would like to thank INEP as well and Admiral Fernekos for setting it up, and all participants, as well as Marios for setting this strategy international panel. As a practitioner of strategy, first of all, I have to say I'll come up from where Farid stopped actually. I'll present three arguments. My first argument is that even though everybody knows that bad times in world politics always return, we tend to forget it. As easy as it is difficult to cope. Was United States, NATO, the EU, the West in general ready for what happened in the year? This year, did they have to wait for Russia to invade Ukraine and Hamas terrorist attack in order to change the politics in the area? So this is one important question and sheriffs following what will always be wanted. So while Caucasus and the Middle East are widely interconnected, they should be given and studied under different parameters. Actually, I see as a base, there's a triangle of instability. The base goes from the Middle East down to Eastern Mediterranean, down to Libya, and the apex goes from Ukraine down to Caucasus area. So at this time, a lot have been said, and other speakers talking about Caucasus area. I'll concentrate on the Middle East issue. My second argument is that East Med and the Middle East actually has renewed geopolitical relevance and increases security interest. This interest pre-existed actually the Hamas terrorist attack of the 7th of October. However, we tend to forget it. There was a lot of issues in the area after the, let's say, the Arabic winter. A lot that is happening. There's Syria going on. We got issues in Iraq. We got Libya. A lot of different situations there. It was for the last decade. All the area there was on the flux, changing all the time, and we see that happening. So, and apart from that, we constantly see cyber attacks as well as terrorists, which are always there. Now, it could be added that the discovery of vast natural resources actually provided more significance to the area, both geostrategically and geoeconomically. Now, unfortunately, we, the West, did not actually, the players did not recognize this in the right time, and it left, there was a security vacuum in the area, and there was a lot of strategic competitors that had the hegemonic aspiration in the area. We'll go through that later on. So, my third argument is that already, as I mentioned from CC, I believe that since already 2020, there was a paradigm change in the Middle East and in the Eastern Mediterranean. What we experienced mainly after, as we mentioned, the Abraham Accords and the Gel process, there was a lot of shifting in power in the area. And countries with the same mentality, talking about Greece, Cyprus, Egypt, Israel, other moderate countries, along with the countries in the Gulf, came together with the United States being in the area in France as well, to have a different paradigm, a different new architecture of security in the area. I think that was an important thing that happened before the 7th of October. Within that paradigm that we have seen up to date, a number of positive developments, and which I can list one or two of them. We thought, first of all, we see the agreements on the delineation of the exclusive economic zone. That was a major achievement in the area. As well, a lot of bilateral, trilateral, and multilateral agreements that came off, not only in the defense sector, but also in the economic sector, as well in the social sector. So, this shift was ended abruptly on the 7th of October. And putting on ice, actually, above all, long-awaited United States-backed agreement normalizing relation between Saudi Arabia and Israel. It is obvious that this relation would have been a major change, just a game changer in the area. And of course, it would have given leverage apart from Israel, but also to Saudi Arabia vis-a-vis their enemy, Iran. So, Hamas terrorist activity did interrupt this process, and however, and it was not the only case that now is happening in the area. We see that Iranian attacks actually on United States installations and organizations in Iraq and Syria, and I was personally not surprised to see Houthis in Yemen coming in support of what's happening there. And one issue that we should look as well is the hesitation of Hezbollah to take more actions in the area. So, at this point, I would like to address some other specific issues. First of all, they have seen the lack, exactly this vacuum that was a power vacuum created a lot of competitors in the area. And of course, Russia is there, significant to Syria. We see Iran that was mentioned before. I have to mention as well China, but more or less on the geoeconomic sphere at this point. And of course, Turkey, which is an elephant in the room that we tend not to speak about, and it's there. Their actions, even though there's downgraded today, their actions actually put a more problematic in the area and create, in many times he had created issues of insecurity to other nations in the world and increasing national tension. Now, here is where we stand. If I could today do something, I'll turn the clock back the situation before 7th of October 2023. That is an important thing, and but today it is 126 days after Israel's war to eliminate Hamas, and the objective are not reached, and these 136 hostages are still there. We have a humanitarian crisis in Gaza Strip, and still civilians of both sides have been killed. What is the next strategy? At this point, I would say that it is futile to support that actually Hamas cared about the Palestinians and the Palestinian cause. Not at all, actually. No one can say that. Otherwise, they would have taken a different policy on this issue. Their case actually was driven by whom? Was to one word, to create havoc and chaos. Fauda is the known word that goes out here. And this I've said why Houthis was not caught by surprise, but because their actual thought is create Fauda chaos in the whole area. And this is actually stopped mainly and kept down because of the policies followed by Egypt, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and other moderate countries, apart from the support they have from the United States and generally the West. So, by my understanding, at this time, there is a war attrition in the area, and actually Israel is at the forefront of this war attrition. Well, all this has been said. What is for the future? I believe that centuries' experience in the area shows that we cannot be prescriptive at this point. What will happen? What I see, first of all, for me, it's obvious that the Gaza war should stop as early as possible, as soon as possible, and work a political solution to the Palestinian issue. In times of crisis, is always an opportunity to find solutions. And now, so both Israelis and as well Palestinians have suffered. If we do not do it now, if actually they don't do it now, then when? My second issue is we should remain present in the area and suppress strategic competitors. And we should use the right incentives between and disincentives in order to do that, and naming the countries that I mentioned before. Third, experience and lessons learned that no one can go alone on this. We need to have a more multilateral and comprehensive approach in the world issue. The fourth is that in this new geostrategic realities require bold and swift but well elaborated decision making by all actors in the area. We must remain vigilant since the Middle East and the East Med is not a simple area of competitive coexistence is possible, I believe. But in any case, we cannot be passive. Sometimes, confrontation leads to conflict or crisis, but it can lead as well to cooperation if we suppress some strategic competitors in the area because their appetite grows with power. Thank you very much for it, and I'm ready for any question you have.
So, some points. The definition of maritime zones in the region, together with other bilateral settlements, was and is of great importance. You mentioned as a critical point 7th of October, before and after, like BC and etc. Is 7th of October the September 11th of the entire Europe, Asia and Africa in general? And by your experience, since you have been a high-ranking officer, how close we are to a major incident here in the Eastern Mediterranean?
Thank you very much for the question. First of all, 9/11 actually post-Cold War period and end of history ended in the ashes of 9/11. So now I cannot, 9/11 is a different thing than 7th of October. That was the expectation by the ones who created the 7th of October, to have chaos in the area. That is one of the main arguments. This did not happen, and fairly said so, and Farid a little bit elaborated that I do not see that happen. 7th of October is not 9/11. So I mean, there's still, my understanding, me more knowing the area, knowing the people in the area, is that there is opportunity for peace. At least there is an opportunity for like-minded countries in the area to continue cooperation and go to the paradigm shift that I was mentioning before, to this new architecture that was just in time. That's why I say, if I go back, let's forget what's gone, go back to 7th October and continue from that point. If we do not do that, then we will find ourselves in a dead end. And the situation on the ground, and the situation, how other countries dealt with the issue in the area shows that it is so.
Thank you. Thank you, General.
Is there invisible confrontation between American?
I think that is possible. No, there is not major confrontation. It's different to solution, to find the solution of the issue that it had, and different invisible confrontation.
Vangelis Adinis is with us, of course. Now, Professor Adrian Severin is waiting patiently. Okay. So let me go to our guest from Zoom. Hello, Mr. Severin. Romania. He was Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Romania, President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the OSCE and member of the European Parliament, where he had special responsibilities in the fields of foreign policy, security and defense. He acted as well as representative of the European Parliament for Ukraine and standing reporter for Russia. He is columnist and author, among others being the co-editor of the volume Path to Reconciliation, the Economic, Social and Political Consequences of the Protracted Conflicts in the Black Sea. We can hear you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope that you can see me, but morning gathering and on this very special important topic. In preparation of my presentation, I have written a paper which I have already passed to the organizers, and I hope that they could circulate it or show it to all those who are interested. Therefore, I will try to be brief, or as brief as possible within the time limit which is allocated to me. And to address the issue in a, let's say, shorter manner. I will skip some points, some aspects, because the area we have in mind is very broad, and but in my paper I have addressed almost all segments of the geography of the area on which we are contemplating a new architecture of security. Speaking about a new architecture implies the existence of an old architecture which is not any longer available. This remark imposes two questions. How did the old architecture look? And second one, why did the old architecture vanish or collapse? The answers to these questions would allow us, I believe, to imagine how the new architecture should look like. We have to look towards the past in order to think and to have ideas about the future. Now, speaking about the old architecture, one, I believe, could realize that on one hand, it emerged at the same time with a unipolar global order, which followed the termination of the Cold War. And therefore, if this unipolar order is in crisis, the architecture in the region which concerns us should be also in crisis. It's more or less natural. The two are interlinked. On the other hand, we have to notice that this old architecture had two characteristics. One characteristic is that it was a geopolitical, its geopolitical variability. In other words, a pluralist vision on the architecture itself. And another characteristic was what I would say, what I would call a great degree of flexibility or adaptability. Thus, one could identify a number of ideas, guiding ideas of the old security architecture, which were common to all major actors involved, namely United States and NATO, if you want to put them in the same basket, European Union and Russia, together with ideas which were not at all common to these actors, with ideas which were specific to each of these actors, and sometimes these ideas, and this is the most important element, were conflicting. They were not convergent ideas, but they were divergent ideas. Let's take a few examples, if you want. A common idea was the separation, which was at least accepted by all, was the separation of the former Russian, Soviet, Socialist Ukrainian Republic from Russia. So it was that followed the dismantlement of the Soviet Union. This was a common idea, and this was for the West at least based on the famous reflection of Zbigniew Brzezinski, who said that Russia plus minus Ukraine, Russia without Ukraine is a very important state, but anyhow it's a power, mostly regional powers which one could negotiate, while Russia plus Ukraine is an empire which will be a rival of the other empires, which is the necessary empire, as Albright called the United States, and therefore it was very undesirable to see this empire emerging again. So Russia agreed in the end this on that separation with some conditions, and one of major conditions was the Finlandization or neutralization of Ukraine, and a condition which was not necessarily very much promoted, but anyhow it came into discussion from time to time, was the federalization of Ukraine. So this separation, with or without some conditions, with conditionality, and indeed denuclearization of Ukraine was a condition which was agreed by all major actors. So this was one feature, one idea which was common to all major actors. In as far as the rest of the ideas concerning Ukraine, they were quite different. The European Union was in favor of a European integration of Ukraine, with some reservations related ties of the country, And that integration of the European integration of the Ukraine was conceived by the European Union for a long while within the frame of a strategic partnership called Partnership for Development between the European Union and Russia. It was thought that the better the relation between European Union and Russia are, the better are the possibilities and the prospects for Ukraine to become either a very deep associate of the European Union or a full-fledged member of the European Union. As for the United States, from an American perspective, this kind of partnership between European Union and Russia, within which Ukraine would have been integrated within the European structure, was not necessarily something very attractive. On the contrary, the United States were always obsessed by the idea that any entente between Russia and the European Union, mainly what I would call the German Europe, is to be avoided. And therefore, the United States pushed ahead with the idea of a new Europe, so-called New Europe, which was formed by the former members of the Soviet bloc in Eastern Europe. And they have favored, the United States have favored all kinds of partnership, alliances, structures to be built by these countries, which were conceived to be as some kind of a dam, as some kind of an obstacle between any emergence of, let's say, the resurrection of the strategy of the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. That is to say, another entente between Russia and Europe. So, as you see, these two opinions were very much in conflict. And within this conflict, it was a difference between a European vision, which felt that Ukraine should be some kind of a bridge between Europe and Russia, and the American approach, which felt that Ukraine should be not a bridge, but an advanced post at the front between the West, the collective West, if you want to call it, or the Euro-Atlantic West, and Euro-Asia. Another example one could take is the one of concerning the enlargement of NATO. This example shows the flexibility and the variability of this architecture. One started from the policy of no inch eastwards the border of reunified Germany, and then it was moved towards the integration of the former Warsaw Pact countries plus the Baltic states, but without touching the former Soviet republics, and that was the red line which was clearly put forward by President Putin. Like it or not, but he put it very clearly. And then it was a policy of the NATO summit in 2008 in Bucharest, which opened the door, the policy of open doors for NATO to Ukraine and Georgia. So these are obviously characteristic of this developing concept of architecture, of security architecture, which eventually led us to war, because once the red lines were crossed, the war was there, and we had to expect it. Once we did it, we undertook the risk of having these troubles. We cannot claim that we were not aware of what is going to happen. We are not happy with what happened, but this doesn't mean that what happened was unprevisible and unavoidable, unexpectable and unavoidable. I would very quickly call for some or mention some other parts of this old architecture. And I would call the Baladur Doctrine, which was extremely important, borders and rights of recognition of borders and rights of minorities, the Treaty on the Conventional Forces in Europe, which was under the OSCE's auspices, The Montreux Treaty, which was not touched, and it was, and still it is, the foundation of the security in the Black Sea, but indeed many countries, especially the United States, put it into question because the United States wanted to increase the presence of the American fleet in the Black Sea. Then the organization of the Black Sea Economic Cooperation, it was another piece of this security. The trilaterals, Romania, Ukraine, Poland, Romania, and they were later went southwards through the trilaterals, Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, and Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, which were called by the American analysts back-to-back trilaterals. So they were also conceived as some kind of pieces of this architecture. And more recently, these trilaterals were the product of the thinking of the local countries: Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, wherever, Poland. The new version of the same thing, which is a 3Cs initiative, is this time not a product, a genuine product of the region, but it is a product of the American strategy, who came back with the project of building some kind of a dam separating the European Union and Russia. Certainly one should recall the G7 plus 1, which was promised to Russia at a certain point in time, never became a G8, but G7 plus. What if that was the architecture we're speaking about? We should notice now that the security architecture along this demarcation line between the collective West and the collective East has now collapsed. And in place, it appears a fault, not only geopolitical and geoeconomic, but a civilizational one. And this on the area of the old architecture now is a front line which passes there, on which there is a risk of a defeat, not only for the political, not only for the political powers that carry the Western civilization, but even for the civilization itself. And this is something which we have to be careful about. A new regional architecture, I would also add, can only be built in the context of resetting the entire global order. Another conclusion, I would say it was not the security architecture in Eastern and Southern Europe created under the condition of the unipolarism installed at the end of the Cold War did not collapse because Russia's opposition made. Russia dissatisfied with the post-Soviet status reserved for it, but because of the differences in the strategic opinions between America and Europe that collided. It was not the war between Russia and United States that determined the collapse of the security architecture at the border between the West and the East, but the internal struggles of the collective West, respectively between USA and European Union. Russia has only dealt the last blow to an already systematically structured architecture. I would also say that the disorder on the alignment that concerns us now today is not the expression of a local regional conflict, but forms the content of a global war, waged not between, as some say, democracies and tyrannies. No, I believe that the war is between the Western oligarchies and the Eastern emerging aristocracies, to take the definition of Plato and Aristotle, between the unipolar globalists and the multipolar sovereignism, between the rearguard of a decadent American-centric unipolar order and the vanguard of the emerging multipolar Euro-Asian order. So I think that this is indeed the fight. Now, as some, I believe that if the Cold War ended without a peace conference, normally the wars end with conference, I think that now we need some kind of conference. If you want a new conference for security and cooperation in Europe, or a broader one which should include certainly the emerging global powers from Asia, which should redefine or reconfirm the main principles of the international law which should govern the 21st century. And I think that these principles should be at least the following 5. Multicentrism, or which means giving up the unipolarism, the symmetry of the powers organized around the main coagulation centers and their dynamic balance, the disideologization of international relations, the indivisibility of security, and finally ensuring peace through economic, social and territorial cohesion while promoting the strategy of common project based on solidarity of interest. I think that the issue, in the same context, the issue of the geopolitical states and the ethnic states should be tackled in the future. I don't have time to enter in the details, but basically the nation states in Europe were formed following the principle of nationality. Not all states are in that in our area, in our regions, are having this kind of identity. We should see what are we going to do with geopolitical states, and so states formed not on the basis of national, the principle of nationality, but on the basis of geopolitical rationale. And the ethnic states. I think that we have to tackle the problem of the economic war, namely the economic censorship. These procedures of the economic sanctions, the idea of economic sanctions should be regarded and should be regulated, because otherwise these economic sanctions are not, economic sanctions system is not only unlawful, but it is damaging not only for the people and countries which are in conflict, but also for the third countries. Something like a local conflict as the one in Ukraine, which might have looked as a local conflict, became a global economic problem. I think that we have to look, and the international law has to look on the problem of alliances. Yes, countries should be free to establish the alliances which fits them well, but at the same time, the relation between these alliances should be regulated in order to establish a balance of power at the global level and certainly in our areas. I think that we have to look to the issue of the right to intervene, the obligation to protect. I don't enter into details, but these principles which are rather new, obligation to protect, which is followed by the right to intervene, creates a lot of problems, as much as the doctrine of the preemptive strike, which is also to be considered. Promote diplomacy in trying to solve the Ukrainian issue, and because I think that following the pace of war is obviously not able to bring us the security we all want. I have in my paper, but I'm not going to speak about that, about the problem of relation between Israel and Hamas. Certainly we cannot ask Israel to make peace with Hamas, but we could ask Israel to promote a political solution without which any military solution has no future. We need, I believe, reform. On the Caucasus, I just mentioned an older idea of mine. I think we need in the Caucasus the establishment of a commonwealth of the Trans-Caucasian state. I think that, of course, I cannot argue because there is no time for that, but anyhow, just take it as a possible idea for further reflection. And certainly, I think that also we need some consideration for the problem of the Western Balkans. We cannot decouple the Western Balkans from the rest of the region, and there we still have to solve the problem of the relation as I would say, the Kosovo problem, which is not yet solved at all. much for your attention. I hope that, I could pass the messages and some food for thought.
Well, I don't know how risky this is. Other than that, you spoke about the establishment of a commonwealth of the Trans-Caucasian states. Very interesting point. And you also spoke about some very, very crucial, the probable international conference of the reconsideration and updating of the Montreal Convention. I don't know if some of our guests. Yes, thank you.
Can I make a question to?
Yes, of course, of course.
I would like to ask, all the European Union citizens deserve such a situation. What I mean, that the last 2 years we pay triple prices for gas and oil, and of course groceries, vegetables, everything is very, very expensive. For what? And to send all the Russian weapons to Ukraine. Do you think that this is a main European Union policy? Do we deserve to live something like that?
I would kindly ask you, dear Professor, to answer within 2 minutes, please.
Okay, certainly. Indeed, number one, European Union is the body which was meant to promote peace and to assure the peace on the continent, not to act and intervene in wars. So, to my mind, what you explained, the substance of your question led us to the idea that apparently the European Union is changing its policy and becoming from a body which was able, a soft power, transforming from a soft power which was able to use soft instruments in order to promote peace into some kind of a hard power, indeed, following the American policy, which certainly is wrong. Secondly, we spoke for a long time about the fact that the European Union, Western Europe, call it as you wish, but you know what I am understanding, was dependent from the point of view of military security from the United States and dependent from the point of view of energy security from Russia. Certainly, it was good, it would be good for Europe to get rid of these dependencies. But what we got now, it's maybe we got rid of the dependency from Russia, at least formally, but we became dependent on energy from the United States. So I think it's a wrong decision. The last point is precisely that one. I think that our duty as Europeans, as members of the European Union, is first and foremost towards our citizens. Their lives matter, the quality of their lives matter. And I don't think that we should diminish the quality of their lives in order to support a war which we cannot win. Nobody from our camp, to say so, could win this war. This is absolutely clear. And by doing that, we are indeed diminishing, as I said, the quality of life of our citizens. And to end it, this is a wrong policy. Maybe I think this war is not ideological, this war is not about values, this war is about power. And okay, maybe sometimes it's good to embark in a war for powers, to get more power, that's fine, provided we can achieve it. But I think that this is a attempt which cannot reach the target, and if we cannot reach the target, it's absolutely bad to diminish, to pay that exercise, adventure with the quality of life of our citizens. I hope I answer your question.
I have an extra question, but I keep it for the end.
Okay.
Thank you. I give the floor to our host, Efthymiopoulos. Dr. Efthymiopoulos is the founder of Strategy International and Associate Professor of International Security and Strategy in Napoli University, Paphos, and head of the Department of History, Politics and Internal Studies with an empirical experience of years in various countries. Of course, if you want to see more, go to the website of Strategy International.
Thank you very much for coming today. In our event, in our speech, I'm humbled and honored to have you here amongst us with the possibility to have a distinguished audience and a distinguished panel with some of the great minds, if you want, from a variety of European and non-European countries whom I had the pleasure to work with over many, many years, and also to include members of our team, friends, colleagues who have been here for a long time in my home city of Thessaloniki, where we took the opportunity to make a small event out of the many that is going to be following soon. So please stay tuned for this. Allow me to thank my dear friend Stelios Efthymiopoulos for organizing the grander, if you want, event, but more so to thank our speakers so far, and including also my friend Nikos Lodianos for moderating this discussion, in the hope to discuss a very, very important issue with regards to the new security architecture, which I had the pleasure to propose on the basis that for those of us which have empirical knowledge and empirical expertise throughout different countries and through different cultures and civilizations, some of the things are becoming quite evident and quite clear. And I'm not going to take too much of your time in order to not waste too much time on this, but the new security architecture and the design of the new security architecture is a prelude of what is going to happen. The term new security architecture has been utilized very far, not back too much, but in October 7th, 2023, where Israel has been attacked by a terrorist group called the Hamas. And soon after, allies of Israel, including also allies which want to be in the larger cooperative sanction with this, if we can call this, through the Abrahamic Accord, they are attempting to find a solution, if you want, to the Palestinian issue that has been pushed back because of the attack, and where in other circumstances you would have seen a momentum of a build-up of different agreements, among others, as my dear friend Gela said, the possibility also of an agreement of peace, which is a larger security architecture that would follow, but would rather have the element of peace rather than the element of a war or wars that have the tendency to multiply. Now, in order to keep it short and concise, what I'm going to try to do is that I'm going to connect, if you want, the wars, the pending wars or the ongoing wars, small or big, current or regional, or you can call them as you wish, they're all wars. These wars are interconnected because of a larger attempt to reorganize a global order where we call it either the global south or multipolar world or a more global or regional Europe or the Arab Gulf, for example, waking up vis-a-vis the rest of the world, or Iran along with its allies, whether this is Turkey or Russia, wanting to have a more action piece into the world, or etc., etc., or historical and religious reasons that are coming into being, into the larger equation why these things are happening. To keep it short, the map of alliances will certainly change. And to also keep it short, the map on the balances of power will also change. And a big fight that is coming up is that winner countries have very much to do so with a very simple equation. He who controls financial trades, logistic, straits, or military capability, or military innovation, or security or market innovation, or even banking and trade will be able to suffice to create or recreate a new world order that is becoming into being. For those of you who may not agree to this, simple examples may occur in the different region of historical perspective, such as the United States in the 20th century, China in the 21st century, other regional countries, Russia, for example, which was not answered ever whether it belongs to the Eurasia region or the European region, or whether it belongs to Europe or even NATO for that perspective back in 2001. And with that respect, the regional actors are actually also, if you want, the receivers of these vibes. small or big countries, medium size or big size, are the ones that have to decide on their national security, considering what is their next door neighbor, big or small. And for some reason, wherever there's a small one, there's a bigger one. So depending on what the regional neighbor does, then we get to associate our national security and therefore our economy to be viable or non-viable or existential, or change the perspective of things as they are, considering technology or larger trade or new opportunities that may arise. What you're now seeing in the world, and I think some of our predecessor speakers told us, we are to see a new perspective of alliances that is based on the wishfulness for national goods to be implemented in the national markets first, versus a collective such as the EU, a collective on the Euro-Atlantic area, and so on and so forth. That attempt does not come without a security threat. I was just reading that the NATO Secretary General had called the national security advisors of all NATO countries to meet with each other, basically to tell them the reality that national security is to be changed. And the more diverse the needs are, which is for a normal economy, for a national economy, the more risks we are associated, because up to the 21st century, we thought that we would go collectively in a global area phenomenon where we would share trade, we would share common goods, we would have a common agricultural policy, for example, in the European Union.
And we see what happens now.
Exactly. But this fails. Why? There are different layers of understanding. Reality versus wishful thinking versus decision making that does not come together. In the prelude of this event, we were talking with Nicholas to actually put into the equation the fact that we need to get out of our traditional be correct in the political arena in order to be elected or even keep a political position into it. Why am I saying this? We're now buying military weapons. We should have, but other countries also do. And it is scary to think that Germany, the one who lost World War II, has the biggest military weaponry buying of weapons, new weapons, 21st century weapons, in the whole of Europe, in great amounts of money.
Not yet
Followed, excuse me?
Not yet implemented.
It is implemented already, but it starts with logistics, then the progressive, but the finance is there. The second part is Japan. Again, another country which lost Second World War. Japan is implementing billions of dollars of weapons buying. So to put it very clear, what is going on that we need to know that we're not aware of just yet? 2024, I think, will be a very imbalanced year. Two reasons. Too many elections around the world. We're counting 60 plus elections around the world. So we wait who gets elected, then we talk in 25. The war in Ukraine will continue on. The war with Hamas will continue on the Middle East. Israel will turn into Hezbollah. Take it or leave it, this is the truth. And micro wars between Iraq, Iran, Shia, Sunni, and so on and so forth will continue. But also South Asia region, in Indonesia and the Philippines, versus, for example, Vietnam, 16% of development every year. So, things are very specific. We're going into a far-fetched, deep-rooted reorganization of the strategic alliances, and with this we will create new balances, new economies, new approaches, and new security architectures that do not attempt only on me or our dear guests, but on decision makers, which unfortunately in the West do not see the realities, but eventually they will start seeing the realities post-electoral results, starting with the European elections. So we gotta be moderate, we gotta be flexible, but we also have to see the realities. Thank you very much.
New alliances. New alliances.
No lies. I said it, yes. It's coming.
Very briefly, the maps of alliances will certainly change, and many new episodes in front of us in 2024. we make mistakes with the dates. We haven't realized how we got to 2024. Okay.
Time is lapsing.
So, our next and last but not least, Dr. Joseph Devergis is the head of research and analysis of Director of Strategy International. He's an expert of strategy, security, mass diplomacy, information warfare, and statistical influence models, among others. Excuse me, Joseph, but I don't...
Specialized knowledge and real-world experience is a hallmark of Strategy International. I think it would benefit the discussion if I could do a general recap of what has been said today. When we talk about geostrategy, we talk about new security architectures, but I suppose many people that talk about these things don't bother consulting a map. Geography is a huge mediator of what happens around the world. Natural resources that give the potential for wealth is a huge mediator as well. So in order to understand what's going on in the world, as what happens in the Middle East right now, or the Persian Gulf or the Gulf of Aden, it's really geography that does all the talking. If we start from South Caucasus, Russia really views it as a part of its post-Soviet Union dominion, and what President Putin said yesterday about his so-called historical facts was not wrong history per se. It's really the ordained version of Soviet state-sanctioned histrionics about history and how it should be viewed. Georgia, which is a major player in the southern Caucasus, and Gela was very polite not to say that it's really the key to the Caucasus area, is happily continuing toward the membership in the European Union, which of course is a happy stance for the European Union, but it really calls to attention of all this flab that the European Union has in formulating foreign policy, because it started as really as an association of coal and steel, then it went into an economic community, but it really did not go into a political entity. And I'm not sure to what measure it can go to such an extent, because its members really do have very conflicting viewpoints and very conflicting interests in many matters, whether it's economics, which is always the main driving force, and whether it's foreign policy. But as my colleague very rightly pointed out, new alliances will come not as a result of actually trying to indoctrinate our citizens as to what our think, but because the real situation will stare us in the face and we'll be facing the actual consequences of it. Ukraine actually faced the real consequences of a new reality. Azerbaijan, for example, in the southern Caucasus region, aided by Turkey, seems really more eager to throw its weight around nowadays. Armenia, after having lost the enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh, is really trying to find new viable partners. The Soviet Union, and after that Russia was supposed to be a peacekeeping force, but only in name there. Of course, that did not go well. And the regional power balance has shifted away from Russia in the area, and perhaps towards Turkey, Azerbaijan, and perhaps the EU. I do believe that at least in the southern Caucasus area, while Moscow's soft power potential has declined, it unfortunately does still have leverage in these areas, and it has potential to destabilize. The war of Ukraine will have a say in what Moscow does next, although I presume that it seeks new alliances on its own. The new expansion of BRICS, for example, it's a huge event for them, but also will bring Russia in a continuous involvement and competition with both Iran and Turkey, which will probably make it to reposition rather than actual retreat. As far as the Middle East security architecture is concerned, well, it's nothing new. When the British and Russian empires were in conflict there together, it was called the Great Game. We're playing the Great Game, but it was the American naval strategist Mahan that actually coined the term Middle Earth. Even to the uninitiated Middle East, even to the uninitiated, we now understand that the Red Sea and the Suez Canal are very crucial to world commerce. I'll give you an example. Revenues from the Egypt-Suez Canal fell by 40% from the beginning of this year compared to 2023. Of course,
And we published it.
yeah, and we published it as well, and we actually have a nice review coming about that as well. The thing is that this kind of event does influence the West, and in a positive manner, because Western internal manufacturing, is aided by this thing, because Chinese import products are more expensive. If we talk about Africa, France used to be the biggest exporter there. Now it's China. So there needs to be a cap in that, and the West went along for too many years without actually manufacturing and outsourcing its manufacturing to places other than the West. And slowly we begin to see a blowback. The destabilizing factor, of course, in the Middle East is Iran, although it would be fair, I think, to say that there are a lot of enmities between countries of the Middle East and Northern Africa, or of the MENA regions, as they are called. And it is also a fact that the often confrontational relationship between both the United States and China and the war in Ukraine have destabilized in the political and economic sense Europe as well. While the US is really deemed to involve itself less in the Middle East region. I do think that the normalization of relations among most countries in the region have taken place in the last few years. Farid rightly mentioned the Abrahamic Accords, which was not really just a new deal. I think it was one of the genuinely ground-shaking deals, because former enemies actually went eye to eye and at the least agreed to have diplomatic relationship. Having the Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain talk with each other and recognize one another, it's a great thing, as well as the restoration of diplomatic ties with our old Greek friend, Persia, Iran, and between Iran and Saudi Arabia. That's huge. That's huge for the Muslim world, although us as Westerners are not really cognizant of that fact. Nevertheless, I would say that the security architecture in the Middle East is largely confrontational, and I'm not sure if Farid would agree that it also works on a bartering principle as well. That is, I think, a very good point of future discussion and research. In that area, well, there have been discussions to actually have agreements or cooperations on such soft agendas like green energy, the gas market security. I think that the current view is that a smaller group of countries band together, and as Mario said, for the need for a new security architecture, band together and try to make do for common interests. Chinese rhetoric in the area from the Caucasus to the Middle East is always about shared security and of China mediating evolving crisis. What it did for Saudi Arabia and Iran is a diplomatic win. In retrospect, I would also like to mention the role of technology and that it should be taken into account when talking about the new security architecture. So the ability to actually project ideas to more technologically advanced audience by bypassing central governments is a very enticing one, and it should be a tool that the West should use. My final remark would be that Strategy International is really comprised of a cadre of renowned experts, such of those people who have things to say, who specialize in crafting policy, decision-making, communication, training, and scientific research, amongst others. I believe we have a very effective mix of scholar ability coupled with real-world experience in world affairs, political and financial affairs, and of consulting and tackling and taking charge. Above all, we're science and research-driven, and with research based on real-world events rather than of some staid book-wise knowledge that really does not take into account new ideas and new developments. Thank you very much indeed.
Briefly, I keep only this, something that we don't listen to formal geostrategical discussions. The role of technology should be taken into account when talking about our distinguished
I thank you.
speakers.
I thank you.
And one last thing. Εν είδα ότι ουδέν είδα. I know one thing that I know nothing. Socrates.